Hello again, everyone. This is Caleb Aylesworth here for CG Tuts, and you're watching part 2 of the Introduction to Polygonal Modeling and 3ds Max tutorial series. In this section of the tutorial, what I'll be doing is I'll be demonstrating how to use the tools that I showed you in the first part of the tutorial, which are basically some of the tools off the main toolbar here, and some of the functions under the Modify tab of the Edit Poly Modify or Edit Poly mode for an object. I'll also be using some of these standard primitives here under the Creation tab to build this nifty little retro TV that you see here in my reference image. Now, I used this in the last couple of my tutorials too, and I forgot to mention it, so I'm sorry about that. So I'll mention it this time. The way that I'm getting this image, my Windows picture viewer, to stay on top of the window, to stay above 3D Studio Max while I work, is I use this little free download program called Always on Top Maker. Just download it, run it, and then hit Control-Alt-T when you have that window selected. And from that point on, it will always stay on top. If you want to hide it again, just hit Control-Alt-T again, and it will no longer stay on top. So without further ado, let's get started, shall we? So the first thing I'm going to do, because the TV looks pretty much like a box, or the main shape or form is a box, I'm going to start with a box, a standard primitive box to be exact. So I'm going to go over here into my top view, and I'm just going to left click and interactively draw the box out. Now you'll notice that it's not centered in world space from top view and also from the left view. This corner is sort of in the center of the grid. I don't like that. I like to always have the object that I'm working on centered in my scene. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right-click right here on the Select and Move tool, and it brings up this little dialog. And then if you right-click on these little arrows here, on each of them, it will zero out all of the coordinates, which basically puts the center of the box in the center of the world. Except in front view, because in front view, when you create a box by default, the pivot point is at the bottom of the box. It's not in the center of the box. But that's fine for me for my purposes at this point in time, so I'm not going to go over that too much. Now, I'm not liking this default color that it gave me. So, first I'm just going to hit F4 to bring up the wireframe shaded view. And then I'm going to go up to the Modify tab, and as you can see, this is still a standard primitive. I don't have all of the Edit Poly functions yet, because I haven't yet converted it to an editable poly. I can basically just change the length, width, height, the number of segments, and so on. But I don't want to do any of that here. I want to do all of that once I convert to Edit Poly mode. So I'm going to call this box TV. And then I'm going to change the color to black, because I like to have black lines. Now, for some reason that didn't stick. There we go. Now, obviously, if you just change it to black and leave it black, you're just going to end up with a black blob, and that doesn't look very nice. So what you can do is you can go up here to your main tool panel, open up the material editor. Let me just move that over. Grab the basic #1 default gray material, and you can apply it. And you know, sometimes I like to bump up the specular level just a little bit. It gives me a little bit of shine so I can see what I'm working with. So I'll bump up the specularity to maybe to about 25 or so. And then I'm going to just apply that to my object, display it in the viewport. And now if I deselect away from the object, you can see it's got this nice sort of light little bit of specularity going on, and nice black wireframe. I like that. It makes me feel good. So I'm going to stick with it. So now the next thing that I'm going to do is in my 3 different views, my front view, and once again the way that I'm switching for my views is F for front view, hotkeys, P for perspective view, and L for the left side view. And I don't have one set up for the right view. If you want, you can always use the view cube to switch over to the right view or to the front view. I just prefer using hotkeys, so that's what I do. Anyways, I'm going to go into my three views here, my front, top, and side view. I'm going to convert to an editable poly by right-clicking to bring up this menu here, right-clicking on the object, and then saying Convert Editable Poly. Now, here we go. Under the Modify tab, we have all of our nice little selection options and our Edit Geometry options, which I'm going to be using quite extensively throughout the course of this tutorial. So, first thing that you usually want to do when you're poly modeling or box modeling is you want to try to get the general form and the general proportions down as much as you can. I have a perspective view here, so the side of the TV is foreshortened. I can't quite tell exactly how thick it is, so I have to sort of guesstimate, but that's okay. I'm not doing arch design here, I'm doing video game stuff. And video game stuff, as long as it looks good, that's all that matters. If it looks and feels like a TV, then it's a TV. It doesn't have to be exact proportions or anything like that. So now I'm going to hit F3 and then F4 to go back to wireframe shaded. Just take a look at the proportions and perspective view a little bit. And I'm feeling like the TV's a little bit on the long side, so I'm just going to scale it in slightly. And that's starting to look okay for me. So let's get right into rounding the shape out, because you'll notice it's not a perfectly square TV. It's got these rounded edges here, and it's also got this subtle sort of a curvature all the way around the outside of the TV. It's not made of wood or anything like that. It seems to be made of some sort of plastic or fiberglass. So in order to get that, there's a really simple function. You select one edge, then you go over here and hit ring, and that'll select all of your contiguous or concentric edges, or a ring around the entire object, a ring of edges. And then you can hit chamfer, but don't simply hit chamfer. Hit the little box to the right of chamfer. And what that's going to do, let me just move that over. Oops. There we go. That's going to bring up this little dialog box where you have your chamfer amount and your segments. Now, if I only keep it on one segment, what I'm going to get is a fairly hard corner, which I don't want because this one is pretty round. So what I can do is I can actually up the number of segments. I could do 3 if I want. But, if this were an in-game model, the difference between 2 and 3 to how close you're going to get to it is very negligible. So I'm just going to stick with 2. It gives me that round corner sort of shape that I want. And then I'm just going to slowly sort of tweak this corner until the proportion of the curvature seems proportionate to the overall size of the TV. I'm going to say OK. Now at this point I have something in my scene. It's starting to have the shape of the TV. This is a good time to save. So I'll go up to the little 3D Studio Max icon in the upper left corner here. I got my file options here. And so I'm going to go Save As. And then there's a nifty little feature with 3D Studio Max Save As. You can enter a file name. I'm going to say TV. And then you can hit plus, and it will automatically append an iteration number. So it'll be like TV01, TV02 every time, which is really good because you can save in iterations, and if you mess anything up for whatever reason or something gets corrupted, you can always go back and you can go back to one of your older files and you won't have lost very much work. So now that I have the curvature on the corners of the TV, it's time to try to add some of the side curvature here. So once again, I'm going to just select a couple of these edges here. Now this time, because I haven't triangulated the stuff, and the front and the back of the TV are essentially n-gons, they're multiple-sided faces, or more than 4-sided faces. The ring will not work. If I just select this edge and hit ring, it's going to stop when it hits this n-gon, because it's not contiguous. It doesn't understand where you want it to ring to next. So what you have to do is you have to sort of bridge that gap because I don't want to triangulate anything yet. So I'm just going to select the opposite edge for it and do some of its work for it. So now if I hit connect, it will automatically connect a segment through the middle here for me. But I think that one won't be enough for the roundness of the side of the TV here. So I'm going to go for 2 in the dialog box here, and then I'm going to crank up the pinch so I get a little bit wider of a shape. You can say OK. Then I'm just going to take my scale tool, which I already have selected here, and I'm just going to yank it out. Scale it on the x-axis until I get a shape that sort of looks like what I want the TV to look like, or what I see in the reference image there. Depends how much artistic license you're going for. I mean, if I really wanted to, I could like bring it in this way and try to make it look like a piece of bread or something. If I really wanted to, use my artistic license. But I'm going to try to match it up as closely as possible. So I'm just going to scale it out and hold Control and select Vertex Selection Mode, and that's automatically going to change my selection from edges to vertices. And then I'm just going to take that and scale it up on the z-axis a little bit more until it kind of resembles the TV shape slightly more. And I'm okay with that. So now I'm just going to marquee select all my edges straight through, all the way around the TV. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to hit connect, and once again I'm going to go with 2 this time. And then because of the curvature on the outsides of the TV, the ring connect tried to follow the edge flow, but I don't want it to follow the edge flow in this instance. I want it to be straight. So what I'm doing is I'm selecting all my vertices, and then in front view I'm scaling inwards on the x-axis, and that's just going to automatically straighten it out for me. Make sure everything's aligned vertically. So now I can go back into my perspective view, and I can select, here we go, an easier way to do this. I'll select the top and bottom polygons, and I'll hold Control, hit Vertex Mode, and it'll convert my selection into vertices. And then from there, I can once again put that bend in the TV to try and get a shape that looks like the image that I'm working from. And that looks okay for now. I might try to adjust it later. Actually, I'll adjust it just a little bit right now. I'm going to scale this outwards ever so slightly. Excuse me. Okay, that was too much. In fact, due to the length of the TV, I think I probably need an additional segment right now, right through the center. So I'll just go back and turn it down to 1, and then I'll scale that selection vertically. That gives me a slightly nicer curvature all the way along. And it adds a lot to the polygons on the front and back faces right now, but I can get rid of those later. I can always optimize. In fact, I usually don't pay too much attention to the poly count as I work. A little bit. I'm not going to go crazy as if I was doing subdivision modeling or anything, but I'm also not going to try to model as if it was my final optimized model, because I can always optimize down afterwards. And it's more important to just quickly try and bang out the shape as fast as you can and see if it's working. Then you can cut things down later. So the silhouette of that box shape works pretty good for me right now. So I'm going to quickly do another save iteration. And now from there, I feel like the back of the TV actually it's not perfectly straight. Once again, it's foreshortened in the image, so I can't know that for sure, but I think it'll be interesting. So I'm just going to take it, and actually, I'm not going to scale it in 100% from the sides. I'm just going to scale it from the top and bottom, inwards on the z-axis, not along the x-axis. And that'll give me sort of an arc going on there. And then, actually, I think it'll look pretty cool if I put another loop through here and then scale it back out. Now that gives the back of the TV this nice sort of a taper. And I like that. Looks pretty good. So now the next thing that I'm going to want to do here is I'm going to want to, if you zoom in here on the reference image, you'll see that there's a nice sort of round lip that goes around this outer plastic casing and then cuts inwards towards this black portion, the front facing the TV. So I want to get that rounded shape. There's a lot of different ways to do that, but for me, my favorite way of doing that is using a bevel operation under the Modify tab of the Edit Poly option. So I'm just going to select these center 4 polygons, and then I'm going to hit Grow, which will select all the surrounding polygons, and then I'm going to hit Bevel. And now what Bevel does is it essentially extrudes all the faces that I have selected, but then at the same time as it extrudes them, it also gives you the option of tapering things in equidistantly. So that's what I'm going to do. I just want to get that nice little tapered edge there. I'm just going to look at the side silhouette here, and I'm not going to make it quite as extreme. I think that should do it for me. And yes, I'm happy with that. So now the next thing I can do, I'll just hit F2 to make it not all red. It'll just show the edges in my selection, my face selection. And then I'm going to press Alt-W to maximize my active viewport, which is the perspective viewport. And then I'm going to hit Inset. And Inset is exactly that. It just insets the selected faces, once again, equidistantly from their surrounding faces. So now I'm just going to zoom in and try to get this proportion of the thickness of the inset right. I'm not going to go 100% realistic, because a lot of the time if I go 100% realistic, in a video game you won't notice the details. The edge will look too small or too thin, and you just won't see it because of the scale of things in the game. So I made it a little bit thicker, just so it sticks out. Now, it's still looking a little bit flat on the front. I want to round that lip out a little bit more. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select one edge, hit Ring, and that'll select all of the contiguous edges around that ring. And then I'm going to hit connect it one time, and it'll automatically connect it down the center of those edges. Say OK, and then I'm just going to manually pull it out along the y-axis. And that'll just round it out a little bit more for me. Give it that nice sort of rounded feeling. Now is a good time for me to try to set up my smoothing groups here. So what I'm going to do for that is I'm going to make a selection of some edges here. And then I'm going to hit Loop, and that's going to go all the way around the object. And then I'm going to hit hold Control, and move to Face Selection Mode. And what that's going to do is it's going to select all of the adjacent faces to the edges that I have selected. So now what I can do is I can go over here to Polygon Smoothing Groups under the Edit Poly Modify tab. And I'm going to hit Clear All to get rid of any smoothing groups that were applied. And then I'm going to assign a smoothing group of 1 to this outer casing, but not to the back portion of the outer casing. I'm going to give that a different smoothing group. Oh, except I want this one edge to also be in number 1 smoothing group. And if you remember what smoothing groups are, is they're just a number that you assign to polygons, and every polygon in that group, with that number assigned to it, will try to smooth together with the other polygons in that group number. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the back polygons here, clear all, and then I'm going to assign them to 2 so they don't smooth with the polygons in 1. And then I'm going to do the same thing to the front faces, except I'm going to clear all and I'm going to give them 3. And once again, now looks like a pretty good time to save. So, save as, save. Save a new iteration. I'm going to loop it because this silhouette is looking a little bit rough to me, a little choppy. I'm going to make this angle change a little bit less drastic. There we go. That's a little less extreme for my taste. So moving on, I think the next thing to do here would be the base of the TV, which affords me a good opportunity to demonstrate another technique which I like to use a lot. And this is shift drag a copy. Rather than creating a new standard primitive object to create that base, or trying to extrude it from the base of the TV, which would generate more topology on the base of the TV than is necessary because you won't really see it, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make a selection of faces, then I'm going to hold shift and translate those faces, and it makes a copy of those faces. And then what I can do is I can just shove them up inside the TV ever so slightly, and it'll when I release shift and left click, this clone dialog will come up. I have two options: clone to object or clone to element. Cloning to object would take those polygons and break them off and make them into a new object. Clone to element, on the other hand, keeps those faces as a sub-object of the object that I'm working on. So in this instance, I want to say clone to element. And by default, if I go to wireframe, those polygons are still selected. So what that means is I can now actually take those polygons and just use my hotkeys of R to switch to the scale tool. And then I can just scale them inwards on the y-axis a little bit because they're inset under the bottom of the TV. And then I can hold Control, switch to vertex mode, and then hold Alt and marquee select the middle vertices that I don't want. And then I can just drag those outer edges inwards a little bit too. Switch back to wireframe shaded and just make sure that they're kissing the bottom of the TV there. And they are. So now, once again, even though I selected to vertex mode and then deselected, if I go back to polygon mode, it still remembers my polygon selection, my last polygon selection, which is great because now that I've resized that shape, I can simply hit extrude, and I'll extrude the base of that TV without creating any unnecessary topology in the bottom of the TV. So that's a really useful tool for game modeling or low poly sort of polygonal modeling. So I'm going to say OK. And I'm going to look at my left view here because I actually don't want to have this curvature on the bottom of the TV, on this base here, because it needs to be flat to sit on the table. So I actually don't want that. So I'm going to try to flatten it out as much as possible. I'm going to remove this loop, and that helps a little bit right there. And then I'm going to also remove these loops. And then what I can do is I can actually take my two bottom polygons, go to front view, hold Control and vertex to make my vertex selection, R for scale, and scale it on the y-axis to straighten everything out. And then from there, I can actually scale inwards a little bit on the x-axis to get that nice taper. And in left view, once again, I can scale inwards ever so slightly. Actually, no, I don't like that too much. I'll just leave that part as is for now. Yeah, that's okay for me. Do another save. As a rule of thumb, I usually save every time I think to myself, I like where this is at. So another thing I want to mention is because I extruded from those faces, if I go up here and I say hide unselected, that's going to hide all the polygons of this object that I don't have selected. So hide unselected. Now it's just got my selected polygons, and selected by element. And you'll notice that there's no inside polygons. That's what happens when you extrude off of a face, a floating polygon. It'll extrude the sides and the polygon itself, but it won't cap off the bottom, which is also useful because you don't have to go around deleting them later. So now I'm just going to go back here and say unhide all. And then I'm going to select one edge, hit ring, and I'm going to run a chamfer operation again. Oh, hold on, I have to Alt deselect the middle edges because I don't want to chamfer those. I just want to chamfer the outer corners to get this nice rounded arc again. So I'm going to hit chamfer, and I'm going to change my chamfer amount somewhat. Keep it on 2 segments and say OK. And then if you zoom in, you'll notice that the base is not perfectly straight either. It kind of tapers in or arcs inwards a little bit. So once again, I'm going to select these 2 polygons, and then I'm going to hit bevel. And I'm going to bevel it inwards ever so slightly, just to try to make it rounded inwards a little bit at the bottom. Say OK. And I'm going to affect the smoothing groups for this one. So I just select that element, hold Control, move to face mode, clear all, and since these faces aren't attached to that one, I can put this back in 1, and I can put the bottom in smoothing group number 2. Okay, the base is looking pretty good. So now for some of the more meatier, juicier sort of stuff. I think next I'm going to want to get that TV screen in there because it's a fairly, oh no, jumping ahead of myself here. I want to inset or reverse extrude the depth to the side lip of the TV here. So once again, I'll select my 4 central polygons, grow my selection, and then I'm going to hit extrude. And I'm just going to bring the extrude in reverse somewhat. And then I'm going to right click on the scale box up here in my main toolbar to bring up the scale dialog. And on the offset world, I'm just going to scale it downwards a bit. And what that's going to do is it's going to scale everything inwards uniformly. Just to give it a little bit of taper so we can see that edge a little more cleanly. And that looks good to me. And I will, whenever you extrude, by the way, F4 to hide the wireframe, you need to reset the smoothing groups. Because when it extrudes, it automatically assigns different smoothing groups to everything. So I'll select that edge. I will hit ring, Control, select faces, and I'm going to put them in a randomly different smoothing group, say 11. And, pardon me, I have a phone ringing here beside me. I apologize for that. Anyways, let's just ignore that and continue on. Okay, so now is the time where I'm going to want to start triangulating some of this geometry in the front face here, because it's going to affect how I build the TV screen. So I'm going to need to start squaring some of this stuff off. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select these 3 edges here by holding Control and selecting each of them. I'm going to hit connect, And I'm going to slide this edge upwards until it basically lines up with the vertex that I want to triangulate it to. I'm going to say OK. I'm going to go to vertex mode, select the vertex, select the other vertex, and hit connect. And that will connect those vertices off for me. And then I can go and do the same thing on the other side. And then I'll go and I'll do the same thing down at the bottom here. Select my 3 edges by holding Control, and then hitting connect, and then go to vertex mode, Control select both vertexes, connect, Control select both vertexes, and connect. Oops, selected the wrong vertex. And connect one more time. And then now I'm going to need to do that again to these bottom polygons. Actually, no, I can just triangulate these off. So then Control select the 3 vertices, hit connect, and it automatically triangulates them. And just do it to the top corner here. Make sure this stuff is all nicely triangulated. That didn't work. Oh, that's why. Wrong vertex selected. And triangulate again. And that looks good to me. So now, I'm just going to take a brief look at this, make sure I have the right topology for what I'm about to do, the right starting topology. What I want to do is I want to separate the side of this front face where the TV is going to be. Oh, excuse me. I totally missed something. But that's okay. I'm just going to have to go ahead and remove a few of these edges to get a certain operation to work. And then I can put them back. I missed this little edge, metal edge here. Now normally in a game model I would do that in the normal map, but I'm not going to do a high poly for this one. So I want to actually, model it in. It's an important little detail, so I don't want to leave it out. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to select my central polygons here. I'm going to grow. No. Okay. Just those ones. Control to edge selection, and then hold Control and hit remove. And that will delete not only the polygons, not only the edges, but it will remove the vertices as well. Now it left a few of them behind, so I'm going to have to bring those in manually. Or bring those out manually, sorry. And just going to go around here and select them. Almost there. Alright. And I'm going, oh shit, I missed one. Alright. Now I'm getting some weird smoothing issues there, but that's okay. I'll just change the smoothing group for it. Now the reason I did this is because I want to inset this piece, and unfortunately it wouldn't have allowed me to do that with all of the different triangulation that I had going on there. The inset function would have got a little bit confused. Now that's something you learn by trial and error, something I know already from years of using it, but you just sort of get used to anticipating when the tools are not quite going to do what they're supposed to do, and you know why, so you just learn to work around them. So there, I just insetted that little edge, and now I'm going to do a ring connect so that I can keep this contiguous flow here. Oh, what happened there? I seem to have moved a polygon or welded a polygon over or something. Maybe when I removed those edges. Yeah. Somehow removing those edges is not something that Max liked. Anyways, I lost my train of thought there. I'll just go back and remove these edges again. Oh, well, yeah, basically, the reason I had to remove these is because I have this nice contiguous sort of concentric flow going around the outside. And if I select this polygon, the inset tool will automatically emulate that, or basically it will be dictated by that contiguous concentric shape. Whereas with the triangulation that I had before, it would have had to have been forced to follow the flow of the triangulation, and I wouldn't have been able to keep this contiguous shape here. So here we go. Ring and connect. And then I'm just going to, lost my selection, I'm going to use my move tool and just pull it outwards ever so slightly. And there we go. My hotkey here, W, to switch to my translation tool. And just zoom in here and try to translate it a little bit on the y-axis, just to make it ever so subtly stick out. And that looks pretty good. If I was going for something a little higher poly, I would do more than just one split down the middle here. But since this is, still supposed to be, keeping game level topology in mind, then that works pretty good for my purposes. Okay, so let's take a look at the reference here. Oh yeah, so now the next thing that I'm going to want to do is I want to start to try to add in some of these more major important details, specifically the computer screen, or the TV screen right here. But in order to do that, you'll notice that it has a very smooth sort of curvature on the outer edges. And that curvature is of a different shape than the outer curvature of the whole TV here. So in order for me to do that, I need to set up some initial topology first, and just make sure that everything's divided properly. And just a second here. The specularity on this material is a little bit too high for my liking, and it's kind of getting in my way, so I'm going to turn that down. Alright, there we go, that looks better. So now what I'm going to do is I want to separate the area where this button panel is from where the TV screen is. So I'm just going to put a split down the middle of this front face to divide the two of them, and just to make sure that the two of them aren't interfering with each other. So I'm going to select those two edges, hit connect, and then hold control, go to vertex mode, switch to front view. Now, this is another little technique that's very useful. Over here under edit geometry, remember we have our constraints. So if I switch to edge constraints, what that's going to do is any operation that I perform on my selection now is going to constrain to the edge that it's on. So with these two vertices selected, I'm going to scale inwards on the x-axis, and those two edges vertices are going to slide along the existing edges. Rather than moving directly along the x-axis, they're going to move along the x-axis but constrain to the edges. And the result is a perfectly vertical line cutting through the geometry, the front face there. Now I know that's created an n-gon, but I'm going to leave it like that for now until I'm done subdividing or splitting up the topology on the front face of this TV here, in which case I'll have a better idea of how I need to tie everything off and triangulate everything. So that's fine for me at the moment. I'll just leave it the way it is. Now I'm just going to take a look at it here and sort of judge the spacing. And I feel like I've got maybe a little bit too much space given to the button panel there. So that looks good. And now I'm going to take some of these other polygons on the edge here. And I'm just going to connect these, tie them off. I'm going to use my cut tool because I think I want the split running down the middle again. So I'll just put that back in, cut from one vertex straight across to the other. And I actually don't mind these either. Those could help me find the form of the TV screen. So I'll just cut them straight across. And yeah, even this one up here looks not too bad. But because it's kind of a small area, I'm going to do something slightly different with it. So let's see. Throw in one more cut here. And another cut there just to tie that stuff off. Oops, I missed my cut. Try that one more time. Okay. Now because of the location of where these are, I don't want to try to cut it because there are too many vertices close together. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make my selection of these edges here. I'm going to hit connect. And then I'm just going to slide it up until it matches roughly where the vertices are that I want to connect them to. And I'm going to hold control and switch to my edge, switch to my scale tool, and with edge constraints on, I'm just going to scale it in so I get another straight line. Okay, now just slide this down and match it up. And there, now I have a quad up in the corner there. So that's alright. Just do the same thing for the bottom here. And connect. Slide. Control vertex mode. R for scale. And straight line. Line it up. Select my two vertices and hit connect. And once again for the other side. Select my two vertices and connect. Now lastly, I'm just going to take a look at my remaining topology here. And it doesn't look too bad. Did I miss that cut? No, it seems to line up. I'll cut that one as well. Okay. Looking pretty good. Now, yeah, alright, I think this works for me. So now what I can do is I can take some of this outer geo and I can just nudge it around a little bit. Just try to shape out how I want this TV screen to be formed. Just trying to round out that outer silhouette there by grabbing my vertices and sliding them along. And once again, I still have edge constraints on. I haven't turned it off yet. So they will still be constraining to whichever edge corresponds with the axis that I'm moving them along. And now this cut that I've made here, I'm just going to want to slide it over to. Actually, I'll just do, let's see, I'm not going to do all of the vertices. I'm just going to do the central ones. Okay, now one last final move. I'm just going to grab the outer vertices and scale them once more towards each other, just to make sure that everything kind of lines up nicely. Now in the real world, not everything is perfect. So usually when I'm done creating a model, I'll just go around and add some character to things. I'll grab a few of the vertices and nudge them around, make sure everything's not perfectly straight, not perfectly 90-degree angles. But at this stage of the model, I like to keep things straight. It makes them easier to work with, easier to see what you're working with. And then later on, once you're done with everything and you like where everything's at, you can just do that final pass where you randomize things a little bit and add a little bit of variety in there. So I think I have a pretty decent overall shape for my outer edge of my TV. But there's just one thing that's missing. Actually, two. Now the first one here is I actually feel like I want one more split. I don't feel the screen is quite round enough. So I'm just going to make my selection, hit connect, and then convert to vertices, Alt deselect those two outer vertices, and then I'm just going to scale it. Rather, I'll just scale the outer two vertices there. Okay, now the last thing is these corners here are too sharp. I don't like that. If you zoom in here, they're rounded out pretty nicely. So I'm just going to select the vertices here, and I'm going to the four outer corner vertices, and I'm going to hit chamfer. And what that's going to do is it's just going to round them off ever so slightly, and that looks pretty good. So now I'm going to use my target weld tool, just weld some of that geo over, because when you chamfer a vertex, it actually turns that vertex into four vertices, which I don't want. So I'm just going to target weld some of that stuff over for now. I don't think that's how my final triangulation is going to look, but just for now, that's alright. So I'm going to once again save it.